Hello pals and welcome back to a new video. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book Freakout tag, and that is because we're in June already, and also I thought that this is a fantastic chance to talk about some books that I haven't mentioned for a while or potentially never mentioned on this channel before. I have a cup of tea. We'll go ahead and get started. There are 13 questions and I'm going to try and be as succinct as possible. Right, so the first question is best book you've read so far this year, and that is Blood Meridian by Corman McCarthy. This is an epic western meets historical fiction. This is set on the US-Mexico border in the 1840s and it follows a real-life gang of scalpers. I wasn't sure that this book was going to be for me, and that is because from the very beginning until the end there is what I could only describe as a kind of utterly unrelenting and overwhelming amount of violence in this book. And so you might think, well, why is it your best book of the year? It is because this book I think is an absolute masterpiece in terms of how it is written and how beautiful it is. It's kind of like the King James version of the Bible meets Shakespeare meets Herman Melville. It is just some of the best writing that I've ever read, and the cast of characters in this I still think about all the time, like 5 months on from reading it. We follow mainly a character called the Kid, who throughout the novel has this kind of like slow burn moral arc. Another one of the characters in this, called the Judge, is one of the most terrifying characters I've ever encountered in fiction. I cannot speak more highly of this and I'm really glad that I stuck with it. I think potentially I will read this at some point next year as well. I do also have The Road by Corman McCarthy upstairs kind of waiting to be read, but best book of the year so far, and I'm sure when I film my kind of end of year wrap-ups this will definitely be on there. And second question is best sequel that you've read so far this year. I'm not a person who reads a lot of books in series, like kind of like fantasy or sci-fi, so I've changed this one slightly to best reread of the year so far, and that is definitely Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read this in February and I did a whole video on how much I enjoyed rereading this. Sound quality in that video might not be the best as it was kind of just when I started this channel. I think in that video I said that it was Martin Amis who said that the plot to every Jane Austen novel is that there's a hero and a heroine and then an obstacle. That is very much the plot to Persuasion as well, so I won't go into that. What I will say is that Anne Elliot, the heroine of this novel, is fast becoming one of my favourite Jane Austen heroines. She is 27 years old, so in Regency England that is very much approaching spinsterhood. She's very stoic, she's very reserved, she's quite shy. I love how this touches on the Napoleonic Wars because that's a time in history that I'm fascinated by. I reread Persuasion in the same month as Paula Byrne's The Genius of Jane Austen, and I'm so glad that I did it this way because I got loads more out of the book. And this has really helped me kind of evolve my thinking on Jane Austen. So my favourite reread of the year, accompanied by a literary biography. Right, the third question with my cup of peppermint tea is new release you haven't read yet but want to, and I have two for this, one that I own and one that I don't. The first one is The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller. This is on the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, but I want to read this because his last novel, And Now We Shall Be Entirely Free, was one of my books of the year when it came out in, I think maybe it was 2019, and I've heard really good things about his new novel. I've requested it from my library, so fingers crossed. If not, I will try and pick up a copy. And then I also have a book that I was sent by a friend very kindly, and that is called Fair Play by Louise Hegarty. I'd never heard of this, but this is an ode to the golden age of detective fiction that I love so much. The plot of this centres around a kind of jazz age themed murder mystery party. In a kind of rented Airbnb, one of the characters is found dead. I believe this is quite like meta, so I'm really excited to get to this. As with all new releases and all books that I haven't read yet on this channel, approach with caution, but I love the cover of this as well, so I have high hopes and we'll wait and see. Question 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I'm not really a new release person. I mainly read backlist and classics, or I take some recommendations on new releases. But in the second half of this year, the third volume of the Book of Dust series by Philip Pullman is coming out. I have here the Book of Dust Volume 2, The Secret Commonwealth. This came out in 2019, so I've been waiting for Volume 3 for around 6 years now. For anyone who's not familiar with this series, it is, I guess, an extension of the His Dark Materials series, which came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. So Northern Lights, I think most people will be familiar with that because of the film and the TV series. I cannot wait for this book. We're approaching like book of the decade levels of kind of anticipation. I adore this series. I adore the world. I think the Rosefield comes out at the end of October. I pre-ordered my copy from Waterstones. I'm incredibly excited. I think my early autumn reading plans will include a reread of His Dark Materials and the Book of Dust novels, but I want to do them in series order. So La Belle Sauvage, the first Book of Dust, Northern Lights, Subtle Knife, The Amber Spyglass, Secret Commonwealth, and then the new one, and then I will have kind of read the series in order. But yeah, one of the things that I love about the Book of Dust novels is that there is definitely a story there that's worth the telling, and how much time and pains he's put into these novels I really appreciate. Philip Pullman is one of my favourite kind of authors, so I'm so excited for that to come out. Right, the fifth question is biggest disappointment of the year so far. This isn't a book that I currently own. I read it on my Kobo, so I will pop it on the screen somewhere here. And it is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This is quite a hyped up crime novel, and I should have realised straight away that it wasn't going to kind of live up to my expectations. This though does have a fantastic premise. A girl goes missing from a holiday camp on a reserve in America. Her parents are the owners of the camp, and 14 years previously her brother has disappeared from the exact same place. What I liked about this was, and what I think Liz Moore is great at, is kind of drawing you into a story and then layering it so that it kind of like slowly opens up. However, the problem with this novel is that, to borrow a phrase from the book, is that Liz Moore is writing checks that she can't cash. I really felt that this failed to kind of live up to its own promise. The structure of this I loved because you follow multiple characters through different timelines. 1961, 1975, you're following the investigators, friends of the girl who's disappeared, her mother. And about a third of the way through this, I really thought this is going to be one of my reads of the year. I do love a good crime novel. However, at the halfway point, the plot in this just starts to get very messy. And Liz Moore is doing far too much. And I think more than anything for this one, the pacing really just fails, and all sense of kind of urgency, because you're basically following plots for two disappearances, and all sense of urgency just kind of like falls away. And I will also say, and this isn't isolated to this novel or to Liz Moore, it's something that happens in quite a lot of kind of like crime new releases, is that she really reaches for like a kind of like explosive ending, but that ending just did not feel realistic or tethered to the rest of the story. It just felt too fantastical, and almost like she'd wound her way into a position that she couldn't get out of without kind of quite a big reach. So overall, quite a big disappointment. Like new releases that are hyped, it very often fails to meet expectations. So lesson learned. Right, next question is biggest surprise of the year so far, and that is An Instance of the Fingerpost by Ian Pears. This was a surprise in the sense that I bought this in 2017, 2018, so I've had it on my kind of shelves for quite a while. I read this in January and I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun. This is a historical, I guess, crime novel set in Oxford in the 1660s. And as the novel opens, a character called Sarah Blundy has been accused of poisoning a fellow of New College, Oxford. This book is structured into 4 narrative accounts of those events and of her standing trial. The thing that I adored about this are the the narrators of those accounts, because they're all so different. One is a Venetian, a Catholic, a trader. One is a cryptologist who worked for both sides during the English Civil War. This book is very much focused on the aftermath of the English Civil War as well, but those narrative accounts were confusing because they're all dealing in half-truths or lies. They're all incredibly unreliable. I love Oxford as a setting, as you may well guess from my love of the Philip Pullman novels. The only slight downside to this, which I would say kind of took it down from a 5-star to a 4-star, is that in the last account, a quite like substantial side plot is brought into the novel, which I felt like detracted from the murder mystery that you've invested your time in. But I really want to get to more by Ian Pears, and I cannot recommend this enough. This is from the 90s, and so it stood the test of time. It's just a fantastic crime novel. Okay, so question 7 is favourite new author, a debut or new to you? And that is definitely, for me, E.F.Benson. This is the Mapp and Lucia novels that I read in February or March. E.F.Benson is an author that I'd never read before, but that I'd had on my radar for quite a while. There are 6 Mapp and Lucia novels. This is the 4th, but this is the one that most people start with. He's also, I guess, famous for his ghost stories as well. He was kind of an early 20th century author. I adored this novel, and this has stayed with me. I think about it quite a lot. This is all about kind of the social one-upmanship of kind of English village life in the 30s. It is kind of like really joyful, really funny, really quite moving in places. But I really want to get to more from E.F.Benson. There is a new audiobook of his collected Mapp and Lucia novels, which is narrated by Lucy Scott, who played Charlotte Lucas in the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. She's one of my favourite narrators, so as soon as that's available, I think I will go back and listen to these in order. But yeah, my favourite new author, E.F.Benson. Question 8 is newest fictional crush or obsession. I don't really have one of those, but I will talk to you about some kind of like ongoing things that I'm really interested in. Last year when I reread Middlemarch, at the same time I read this book, which is The Road to Middlemarch, My Life with George Eliot by Rebecca Mead. I've kind of tabbed this quite a lot. You can see how much I really loved this. This is a kind of memoir of her reading life with George Eliot meets a literary biography of George Eliot. Much like reading Persuasion and The Genius of Jane Austen really helped me contextualise and get more out of that rereading, this really helped me with Middlemarch as well. I'm fascinated by George Eliot. I think she's such an interesting character. Everything from living with her partner without marrying in Victorian England, which he was ostracised for then marrying quite late on in life after that partner had died. She's just such an interesting character. And in my last book haul, I think maybe it is book haul, Spring Book Haul Part 2, I kind of hauled some more George Eliot biographies. She's just like an ongoing author that I'm fascinated by. In autumn, I know I'm going to want to pick up Silas Marner or The Mill on the Floss. So yeah, ongoing obsession, George Eliot. And question 9 we're on now is newest favourite character. And I would say this is more of a rediscovery for me. Back in March, I read the first George Smiley novel by John le Carre, which is called A Call for the Dead. This introduces the spy George Smiley in what are known as the Carre novels. The most well-known of those is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. These books are set in the 1950s and they follow George Smiley, an English spy who works at the circus, which is British intelligence as it was then. He is described by his wife as breathtakingly ordinary. He is very reserved, very stoic, but he's also like a very honourable man, really intelligent, really observant. In short, the perfect spy, although he does not look like the perfect spy. I'm currently listening to the second one of these, A Murder of Quality. The audiobooks are narrated by Michael Jaston, I think it is, and they're fantastic. So yeah, slowly working my way through the George Smiley / Carre novels and having a great time. Right, question 10 is a book that made you cry. And I've picked not one that made me cry necessarily, but definitely one that stopped me in my tracks, and that is The Mare by Margaret Hampshire. I finished this earlier this week. It is Sunday as I'm filming this, and this, on occasion, like I said, stopped me in my tracks, and the brutality and the inhumanity of some of the treatment in this kind of really took my breath away. That is the point of the novel. So this is a fictional account of a real life figure called Hermine Braunsteiner, who was a female concentration camp guard in Nazi Germany during the Second World War. She worked in several concentration camps in Berlin in Germany, and then also in Poland as well. This is the account of how she evolves from a kitchen maid to a mass murderer, and also an account of how she meets her husband, who is unaware of her kind of past. They meet in the 1950s. He's American, they move back to America, and then she's extradited to stand trial for her crimes in Germany. I found this really compelling, but not in a gratuitous way. I'd love to have a little bit more breathing space with this just to really think about it, but the kind of more horrific events in this book that are detailed are there to kind of show you the sheer brutality of what's happening. Margaret Hampshire takes this subject and treats it with the kind of dignity and respect that it deserves, which isn't always true of kind of World War II fiction. So yeah, I'm still thinking about this. I think that this will probably end up on my best books of the year. This is on the shortlist for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction, and I really hope it wins. I haven't read anything else on the list yet, but I think that this is fantastic. Right, question 11 is a book that made you happy, and I have 2 books, and they are part of the same crime series. I read these when I was moving house because they are pure comfort, cozy crime reading, and that is Agatha Raisin's Hot to Trot and Down the Hatch. These books are frivolous, they're like silly, kind of low stakes crime, perfect if you are a little bit kind of like stressed, etc. These are 31 and 32 in the series, so I have stuck with this series. I started reading them during the COVID lockdowns, and I very quickly realised that Penelope Keefe narrates the audiobooks of these, and they are just utterly perfection. Every Agatha Raisin novel is essentially the same, but I've come to know and love the characters over time. What I will say about these is, for me, is that the sheer joy of reading these is, I think, worth it every single time. Question 12 is most beautiful book that you've acquired this year. I'm going to slightly cheat because I got these at the end of the year, but the first one is the folio edition of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I reread A Christmas Carol every year, and I also read some of his other kind of Christmas novels. My mum got me this one, and it is so beautiful. It's just such a beautiful edition. It has the kind of original illustrations in it. And yeah, I just adore A Christmas Carol, and I love folio editions. So I have this Charles Dickens. And then my dad also got me this edition of Little Dorrit, which is from the late 1860s. And these ones are the Chapman and Hall Dickens. You can collect his entire works kind of in this series. So I may well start to kind of get a few of these. Again, this one has illustrations in it. It's just a beautiful edition that I know I will keep. Right, the last question is, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? I have just put up my summer reading video, which I'll link down below. Books on that list. There are quite a lot of books on that list. I have been quite ambitious over summer, mainly because I know I have a good 2 weeks off work for a holiday, and I'm going to do a lot of reading during that time. I'd love to reread the Philip Pullmans. I have to say that I'm not really a big summer person. I love autumn and winter. Summer is always a little bit of a slog for me. So I know that when it gets to autumn and winter, I always switch to reading more kind of historical fiction, more classics, classic crime, especially the British Library crime classics. So when we get to autumn and winter, I know I'll be flying with my reading, but I haven't put any definite plans in yet. Right, that is pretty much it for today's video. If you've read any of these, or if you have any thoughts, I would love to hear from you. and I will see you all soon for another video. Bye!